According to the calculations, which have now, been done because we could do it. We have ChatGPT, right? We have Sybil. We have so many systems that we can say, how many people does God kill in the Bible? 2.8 million. Excluding the times where it's not really clear how many people are dying, but based on the large language model and what it understands about those populaces, it comes out to around 24 million. How many people does the devil kill? 10. Because God told him to, and that's the story of Job.
The following clip is exclusive content from the Interversity. Access over 300 videos and 26 courses with advanced metaphysics on demand. Jump in live chats with Savan and the rest of the tribe. New materials are available monthly, along with guides and regiments. Subscribe today and save $25 off your first month membership. Links are in the descriptions. Subscribe to Secret Energy TV or this channel for future show notifications.
There are two schools here, and they told everybody about these schools, about these two trees. The tree of life, everlasting life is called, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But few peeped, including myself, that, wait a minute, whoa. Yggdrasil is a tree, and it's a model of the world. So could it be they were talking about two worlds? And if they were talking about two worlds, one world would teach you the knowledge of good and evil, and the other one would teach you the knowledge of everlasting, or no, it's not a knowledge, everlasting life, which is really also confirmed through a contrast that you can't die. And so as I was beginning to put this together, I was like, or it was being put together for me, excuse me. I was really like, whoa, wait a minute. This for sure is the knowledge of good and evil here, because everything is good, bad. Everything is literally like this lesson of, oh shit, you burned yourself. Don't put your hand in fire again. Let's go to the next lesson. It's like, this hurts. It's like, yeah, I know, but let's keep going. It's like, I don't want to. It's like, okay, that's not courage. That's not being brave. Taking the courage and brave school. You see, what's going to happen there? Oh, I'm going to get beat up some more. You see what I mean? So the knowledge of good and evil. And then there's this other world in which we all participate in. Like the other night, I was escaping death. Like I told you, I had one point, like I was completely submerged in water thinking I needed to breathe and just died there. But then was like waking up like, oh shit. And then you go back again to sleep. But wait a minute, we just killed that guy. Everlasting life. But still teaching you, like this is not, everlasting life doesn't mean you end up in the better world. It means that you end up in the space really exactly matched to where you're at in this one. And now you need to figure out how, it's like when you're dying, taking that awareness that, hey, you don't die anyway. So let's keep going. So then, as I mentioned before, because you had all these aptitudes, or actually not all these, we need to get it very clear about just the last 1,000 years. I'm not going to take you back too far. That's 10 lifetimes for the average person, a little bit more. The situation of the world, for whatever reason, because I'm always constantly reading stories about what happened, begin to decline in the way of just being able to compute unity. Okay? So I'm talking about from the first time you read about a war or a conflict between brothers and sisters, that point. We'll take that as a starting point. And they're saying that's been going on for thousands of years. Like you can read about some of these old battles in Hebron and Geber slew Anaphaxstad. And it's like, all right. So it looks like that this has been going on for thousands of years, this whole division. So division does something to the mind of the populace. It brings in an awareness of a division, like dividing, an enemy, a devil, okay? And it's very clear if you just study simple math that the first devil would have pretty much been your brother or your sister in that context, because it would have been the first thing that you had conflict with, but still in a space in which everything is the same thing. So I started analyzing this heavy, like I'm talking about with real metaphysics, real power, real meditation, even in gamma, because I knew I was on to something, that something needed to be, just as Dan Winter said, and I'll quote one more time, when there's a gap missing from your memory, there's a hole there. And you need to plug that hole, because until you do, things are getting in it and it's contaminating even. So when your history, her story, your legacy is removed, it leaves a hole there. And that hole is very contaminated. It could bring in other things, other concepts, other ideals that are not even really a part of the original framework. That's why we always try to get to the blueprint. The closer we get to the blueprint, the easier it is to see how things became like this. Not so much as just proving that this is real or it's true or any of that. It's more of like just getting the reasons, as I called it in the Code of the Matrix, why this stuff is happening, because it is happening. So when we look at the mindset of most of the people thousands of years ago in any kind of like united, like Rome was, or the Mongolian Empire was mostly Asiatic, but it wasn't all the same Asians in that way. So these times where many people from different tribes are put all into the same space, being able, as you've witnessed right now, to get them synced up on a spiritual belief level, it has been impossible. It's still impossible. We have religions now, but folks is playing with altered characters at this stage, trying to get a free ticket into heaven by saying a name. It's down to that. We think we've outsmarted the whole system in that way. So I'm just saying, like, religions themselves existed because it was a way in which for large populaces to get a assembly line version of spirituality. Because still in its value, the value is God, the higher level, the highest thing. And so thus, if somebody can even say they represent God, then you immediately enter into that person's place in their mind, right? So we get why the Catholic Church would be so interested in that in all of their factions. But again, what we're highlighting here is we're highlighting this specific awareness, and that when you have large swarms of people who are already in conflict, not only like with other tribes, which would bring that home, it would bring that local. I'm gonna have to do away with my notes again here for a moment. The word itself, because I love to have some etymological background on anything that I bring forward. So I'm gonna just jump in the chat right here real quick. And I'm just going to let you see this word real quick. So in most languages, including Latin, the B is interchangeable for V. So I'll repeat that again. In most of all languages, the B is interchangeable for V. You'll find words that were written in a B in one language is written in a V in another language. And then you can also take that and, oh wow, this thing is just doing all types of stuff. You could, okay. So you could also take that and turn it into a number, and that number would be the same. You know, if you wanted to go super hardcore, you would learn that the B is also the number 5 somehow in this sacred system, if you want to call it, of secrets, right? Because that's how it all syncs, is it syncs back to Roman numerals and then Greek frequency ranges, right? And so understand that this word devil comes from the word double. And there's a deep mythos around this. But I first need to just express it from the psychological level. The moment a concept of a devil is introduced to the mind, it immediately splits the mind into two, creating a double. From the simple fact that now a narration begins between what is good and what is bad. And you need to have this conversation locally. It doesn't happen with other people all the time. It happens with you inside of your own mind, trying to weigh what is good or bad for you. So in reality, then, this is a technology, okay? You can introduce one thing and then it starts growing. Like they say, like even Pan is a fertility god, right? And it's just like, they show, abundance just start popping up everywhere. And then we're like, wait a minute, I thought that the abundance was belonged to the women. It's like, again, it's either the woman or the man. Whatever society that you arrive in where one is more dominant, that's the one everybody's going to think is the greater or the higher one. But truly they are equals, like, because we're all the same thing. And this is what happens. It's like you would have to keep defeating people in division in this kind of reality, because each person would have their own measure of what they feel is good and bad, and their own perspective of why one is good and the other one's bad. And that would be like whether it was really your brother or sister a lot of times, because, you know, you could have like some family members that are just really bad, but then you just love them. And it's like, yeah, you should have seen what happened to him when he was a kid. That's why he liked that. But we love Junebug. He's just, you know, like he really has a heart. You see what I mean? But it's all a perspective. But let's keep going, because it's deeper than a perspective. So as I'm saying to you, this is that religion is an assembly line of metaphysics. And what do I mean by assembly line? Well, when they started creating very complex things, we'll take it into the context of a car. They realized that one person was not going to create a whole car, especially from the stock in which they were pulling from. These were like migrants coming over from other countries. And so it was very clear then that they needed to break it down further. Okay? That creates an assembly line. You break things down to their simplicity, and then you just assign a person to each thing going down the line. So they say assembly line was also a technology. Ford and them were, you know, I think the Egyptians were kind of like probably the first ones with the assembly line, but Henry Ford was also, you know, famous for the assembly line because it allowed them to build this complex machine, this Model T or whatever it was then, and it used the industrial power of the human beings along with the machines that were created during that time, the steam engines and this kind of stuff. You see what I mean? So it didn't mean that everyone there needed to be an engineer. You just needed to know your specific thing that you do. And this is, of course, how society was in many ways. Not everybody even went after the spiritual thing. There's still 80 of us right here, right now, right? So it wasn't, there's billions of us in Earth, right? Not just saying they all supposed to be here, but when I'm trolling most of the time, I don't see really any deep occult knowledge. Nor do I actually really see a lot of people really trying to pursue that either, except for the ones that they have crazy, right? Like they wanted it too bad. Let's just put it that way. Like they wanted it to control others, right? So that definitely didn't lead to adepthood. So it's just that awareness. You may be a spiritual person and your friends on Facebook and Instagram, but the reality is it's still a very small percentage of beings. We want to believe that the past societies were completely spiritual. I'm just talking about the ones up until we started fighting with each other. So you can keep that belief. But once we started fighting with each other and we entered into division, then there was a higher majority that was into that. So when the concept of the double was introduced, or the devil was introduced into the populace and people's mind in an assembly line way to carbon copy them over into a spiritual dynamic, because People also who were very ruddy, that was like one of the terms, like untamed, untrained, amhorets, as they used to call it. They were not really useful inside of a village, right? They weren't really useful to a tribe in that way. They were lazy, tried to, eat off of everybody else's stuff and, steal and same stuff you have today going on in the hood. But it's a reality that I Ching, or the way of changes, doesn't change in the way like it becomes something different for everyone. Right? I mean, as a system, it's a yin and yang. When this happens, I kill somebody, their family will avenge me. Their soul will call back from earth. Their DNA won't like me. All this kind of stuff will happen. Right? So it's just something that comes with it all. And as we discussed before, wisdom created this to learn. They say it was a mistake, but they're just trying to tell you, hey, wisdom doesn't know everything. That's why we're calling it wisdom, because it's learning everything, but from the mistakes. And everything in life works like that. So you're looking for all wise. You're looking for all powerful. But we're telling you on this path, all wise and all powerful comes through experience. So wisdom as a being is also still on that path. It's not a thing that knows everything. It's a method in which you do or come to learn everything, the blueprint, the maxim, which has already been discovered. It's going to always be all the way down to the smallest thing and understanding how that works. So when you go nano, when you go atomic, and you just start, just profusely asking about that only, until you understand the dynamic of every single one of those molecules within your life, which is only a few, then you just get everything about how it works. Mainly that energy is your highest priority with yourself in a physical reality. So now that because I know some may be like, wait a minute, are you introducing the devil as a friend? Because bruh, I'm gone. Let me explain further here. According to the calculations, which have now, been done, because we could do it. We have ChatGPT, right? We have Sybil. We have so many systems that we can say, how many people does God kill in the Bible? 2.8 million, excluding the times where it's not really clear how many people are dying, but based on the large language model and what it understands about those populaces, it comes out to around 24 million. How many people does the devil kill? 10. Because God told him to, and that's the story of Job. Right? Where God seems to test his faith with removing his whole family. Okay? Just some more addendums here. God's first murder is always with firstborns or firstborn sons. We'll exclude Abel from this because we know that they were, supposed to be twins, right? But Abel was more favored, so that means he came out first. He gets off, but we're not going to say that God had anything to do with that, even though it was trying to see what's, and according to the context, who's got the best for God, and, it leads to other things, right? But just as it's written, Onan, and Pharaoh's firstborn, Nadab and Abihu, who were also Aaron's sons. So you kill the high priest's sons because they offered up unauthorized fire. This is unauthorized. You're using butane. We use coal. So, and then all of this is coming from someone that is your father? This is exactly why I'm staying on them. I have not removed the pressure. If you notice, they want me to play nice. But I have not removed the pressure off religion and their destruction of humanity, because it leads to that. Like if that game is still being played, a lot of people in there never really made it beyond that game. That's how it all works. If you're outside of that, that's where you're into the advancement, because you realize just how silly that is, but destructive, dangerous, diabolical, demonic, even, if you may, right? So this system of religion is still, when you look at, finally, and this is the last thing I'll say about this in this build, when you look at the Israel situation and the Palestinian situation, it is still very, like when they be on the news, it's just so much of a game. It's just so much fictitious. So when they be on the news and they're like, we needed to de-escalate. This needs to, we need everybody to come together and realize, whoa. In each of their books, it says this whole thing must be destroyed. And only then will there be like a new level, a new life, a new earth. So they're not in that point right now where they want to not destroy the world. And this is like Israel mostly, because I think the Arabs are starting to realize, because they're just spread. It's mainly Islam is massive, right? So in that way, it's like, just on a common sense level, how can someone who's embedded at the height of their consciousness that this existence we must live in must be destroyed, it must die, it must divide, ever come to any kind of agreement or want at the core fiber of themselves, at the deepest that they believe in what they believe in? That's how the depth of what they would need to now believe that they need to come together. That's what we'll be talking about here. So if I'm saying, hey, do they look anywhere close to that right now? No, they're so far away from it. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe something happens. But that would also be because the religion was completely exposed as what it truly is. Because then when you can't see what it truly is, that's one altar, as they call it in church. So now you're at least one altar away from yourself. There's several of these because all of it is deep into the technology of language. But once it alters, now the person is in a whole nother world. And of course, the devil exists in that world, and they have opponents in that world. They're now in a battle, they're now in an army, and that becomes their reality. And until something else that's more powerful than that ideal, not in just one moment, but through a cycle, pervades their entire being, this is the enclosure in which they will be confined to. Now, this word, enclosure, house, shield, shroud, veil, okay? These are all references to the same thing. It's a reference to that we're in envelopes, right? Like the Russian dolls, right? But there is a being shrouding us right now, as there is a being shrouding that being. And it keeps going around. You see what I mean? But it's things inside of things. So you need to understand right away that the thing that is around you is responsible for what you're seeing. Because that is the veil. So it's like, so I'm inside of another being. I'm confident of this. You may call it earth. You may call it your aura. You may have all types of words for it. I don't need words. I just know something is around me. A field, a force, an energy, and something is around that. But by the sheer thing of what I've learned here in the realm of good and evil is that if something is around you, now it functions virtually like your lens into whatever you're experiencing. And it can choose what to show you and what not to show you. So just remember that this is real. This is animate in that way. Earth, fire, wind, water. These are elements, right? And they shroud consistently us. And they determine what we see, what we do, and what we do not see. And the more that we become what we are, you see what I mean? Like, so the more, like, if you became the veil, you'll be able to see everything. Here's the last note. I love the notes are good for this then. In the end, if you master this, you would overcome everything in the game by becoming it. There wouldn't be any opponent because it will all be folded back up. So understand that in mastering what I'm bringing forth, and I'm not saying all of it's coming today, with this knowledge, you will master everything. And this is where the vivid power is. And this is exactly why they have been removing people from it. And this is what I was telling everybody back in the beginning. They hide this stuff under evil. So you'll be afraid of it. Because another thing that happens when you introduce the devil into a person's mind is what? You introduce fear. Because now you've literally split yourself and you have a good version of you, which is scared of the devil or the bad ones. And this brings fear into the consciousness now. So now we have a devil, now we have fear, just from someone insisting that there is something separate than us. Get where I'm coming from here? So this is why we call it the double, because now it's another version of us. But it goes deeper than this. It goes way deeper. Monatomics are, in most cases, the healing element in any super medicine. The reason why I had to make a part 2, 3 to this is because I came across a repository of ancient knowledge in relation to the Quarine, which some would say the Kareen, right? And we talked about this before. The Karen is like the worst. That's like you're pronouncing an ancient language in the American way, Karen. Right. And then, somebody that speaks Arabic will be able to give you the exact pronunciation, but it's more Qareen. Right. And this is the double or the recorders in Islam. It also is spoken on in Pierre Sabac's book, where he tries to itemize that there is literally some other entities that are here. And where I'm always one-upping everything is that I'm just aware that all of this is us. And that's why I'm able to crack the mysteries. I feel like that something is weird has been going on for a long time in like the leaders' minds. Because I see that leaders who are even supposed to be super smart don't seem to realize everything in their text is telling them that we're talking about another version of you. We're talking about a version that is being cultivated, a version that you've been split from for a time, but you will reunite with again. And then the reality further goes forward and then paints this horrific end or encounter or persona on this, as in they threw shade on it. Okay? And then the reality still is whatever we're talking about is a part of you. And if you're a good parent, not like the God in the Bible, you're trying to help your children. You're trying to fix your children. You're trying to raise them properly. You're trying to even be innovative with how you're showing them that they should, that what it is that you're telling them is truthful and honest and should be followed. Right? That's what parents do naturally. You don't have to train them to do that. But something that is not your parent in that way, meaning that they seem to divide themselves completely from being connected to you. It seems to me that they will operate more on the, I quote, so Elijah, I believe this is 2 Kings, is walking through the forest or whatever, the jungle, whatever. Oh, he's walking up to the mount to go and call upon God. 42 boys are on the path. And because he's a bald guy, they're saying, hey, go on up, bald head, go on up, bald head, like jeering at him, right? According to the text. And then Elisha uses the name of the Lord, as it states, as a curse and throws it at the boys. And then the Lord causes 2 she-bears to come out of the wilderness and maul them. So God kills 42 little boys because they were teasing a bald-headed man? So as I said before, the more proficient you are in that stuff, the more destructive you become, technically. Meaning that the ones who've read this the most and believe this the most, you could see what their psychological makeup would be. It's like the backstory of a villain. This is your king? So I put gesture with this. I laugh. I keep a smile on my face so that it could be digested, but it's disgusting. But the people who are doing it are also me. You see where that starts taking you for a spin? There's an accountability that needs to happen here. You may say, I'm not doing that anymore. What about your double? Could there be a part of you still that is doing stuff that is directly weighing on you because it has been untrained? We look at some of the texts about the quarine, what they say is when the human is born, at the same time, a spirit animates in his heart called a quarine, his or her heart. I believe this is the origin of a star. And they then go forward and say, now they're not using nice and kind words, but that the quarine then runs through the person's veins. It lives in the veins. So they were saying basically the devil lives in your veins, lives in your blood. Excuse me, I'll be very specific. They said that the devil lives in blood. He doesn't live in these external. This is like the deeper Sufi works. But they're still encoding it because they're trying to get you to see something. They're trying to get you to see what happens when you get angry. First of all, what is the opposite of meditation? Like we've learned how meditation is such a big cure for so many things that we've been facing in our lives. So let's take a little contrast here in the realm of good and evil. What is the opposite of meditation? Agitation, right? Anger. You're not supposed to be in meditation. What kind of meditation is about to happen? So we realize actually we can start identifying even the condition of a double. We can identify its strengths and weaknesses, but its powers, if you may. Like think about this. So when a person, let's say is an MMA fighter, right? He's totally full of himself in this way. I'm just painting a persona here. I'm not saying that all MMA fighters are into themselves. Some of them are very trained like samurai. But let's just say like a person who's even out there was like Ryan Garcia or whatever. It's just a mess, right? Society just kind of influencing everything. He's got trained. And nothing could be more external is what I'm getting at here. Because when you're making strength, right? And everything is external, right? So instead of almost even being in that meditative, pinged, sometimes Zen, trance state, nothing is more real than getting hit in the face. You know what I mean? In that way. So it's like the opposite. It's like, but then there's also the aggression. Because the aggression is like, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to give myself a headache. But you know how you can just go, like the Hulk. He's got to be like the most external example. You see what I mean? Like just externalism, because it's like the fire inside of your veins has now flowed into every part of the body and it's red and it's dangerous. You see what I mean? However, also you can see where like the training and the being able to be healthy in your body and to be able to respond really fast, the sharpness, kind of like a Bruce Lee. You can see where all those benefits come in, where you could get these two to working together, but you can also see that very few have gotten the two to work together. That aggressive, angry, very powerful, hit you in the mouth. I'm standing on mine, standing on business, like all of that. And get that trained up at the same level of where the spiritual being would be, okay? So just so you can understand where the achievements are here. And this is also why. So what is further revealed as I'm dissecting the Quarin is that the Quarin is made specifically in the ancient Sufi texts of air and fire, while the human, the flesh, if you may, is made from water and earth. That pretty much reveals it all there of why it's a double, because it's made of the opposite elements that you contain. But if you put them all together, you get all four elements, and we may get Voltron at that point. I'm just saying that this would be potentially where the vivid power would be. But you would see the conflict right away. The conflict would be is just as sure as nature interacting fire and wood. You know what I mean? Or any of these kind of opposing elements in that way. But this is why, as they could further this lore about the jinn, there became such a split in the reality of the difference between humans and jinn, because the jinn, if you may, which a Quarin is categorized as a jinn, technically we're talking about an entire species. Some would say the ninth species, as you have vegetable, you have animal, so you have elements, right? So you have these, they say you could categorize it into 8, but they're saying this is the ninth. Another species that is, many of them, in this case, the Quarin, are replicas in that way of us. They're identical in that way, but also in many ways opposite. And this is how they leave it. They don't leave you with any context of what the hell's going on or explain it to me more. You just got to put it together yourself. So that's what I did. I went through the process of getting all the veils, the shields and the shrouds and the enclosures all into a concise space so that I can get a clear visualization of what is going on here. Who am I? Where am I at? Where is my power? And why would it be there? Like, I'm not just going off on, hey, somebody comes with an explanation and I'm like, sounds like it. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, now that that's it, what do I do? What's happening? What's going on? And that's why I was saying before, in the previous build, that's why I believe this is the second. One hand washes the other. This is how it used to be. This was a familiar in the way of, like, there's a part of your vehicle, there's a part of what you are that is the vehicle. It is the power. It is like the cheetah running through the forest. It is the powerful totem animal in that way. However, it shows clearly that the cross being a symbol of the sacrifice, and the process in the garden in which the trees are present in the division taking place between what is clearly an androgynon, all leads to the very clear proofs that your firstborn was sacrificed, meaning that we were split from our love. And you don't love anybody more than you love yourself. You think you do. You just have to be aware that you're everything for it to completely unlock. But preservation is reserved here. However, what really looks over you, it's like that guardian in itself, they've attempted to remove that completely from you so that you cannot communicate or you cannot use it, because it also is the vehicle. It is the dream character. So what I posit, meaning not just it is the being that you're seeing through in the dream. And in my records, I posit right now. That means I am submitting to the records that I know right now we are creating what we're going to become. Meaning that this next existence, and there will be one, we're developing the vehicle for that now. But this vehicle is wayward in many ways. It's untrained in many ways because it's been neglected. It's been demonized in every way. It has been told basically that it is the bad one. And we have actually moved it away from ourselves completely. We turned against it. And in that, we turned against ourselves. And so inside of our mind, there's a constant war between good and bad, which you get so caught up in, you're not even realizing what you're actually in anymore and what's going on with you and how many you hurt and what's happening because you choose, how many in you you're hurting because you choose and fail to recognize these clear proofs. As they say in the Quran, here's clear proofs. Let's get one of those clear proofs. Here's a clear proof. He will provide believers with signs on the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them what is true. The Quran 41, I think that's the Kaf. One more here. Everything exists in pairs, one set against the other, and he made nothing that is incomplete. I also posit that this being called Allah, also called Yahweh, has been for sure genetically engineering consciousness through these scriptures, through the technology of language, not necessarily other technologies in which are ascribed to it. You will only need to really know words to do this to nations of beings. And no, I do not believe that this was always going on. It's like common sense. You would almost have to like separate people for real, like keep them isolated or only work with isolated groups. We can't say that all the time on the planet, everybody was aware of everybody's presence here, or maybe we were all in dream time. We can just say that there was a complete separation point. But we also need to realize that what we separated from was the truth. And now that that separation is pervaded through the world is living in the realm of the father of lies for real. Everything is a lie when you look at it. It's like all the stuff they say about the money, the technology, the people, the owners, the history. This is the father of lies. But then who do they tell you the father of lies is? The devil. And then they're kind of right. And this is the psychological game because you're still really telling the lies to yourself inside of a narrative that is being programmed. We have yet to actually realize the thing that we're talking to is actually what we're going to become next, because that's the most time we spent with anything. That is what we really got to know. And then when you come into this awareness, it starts to activate that. It's a retraining that needs to happen because it's like you began to use something that was very constructive to you in a destructive way. Now it's not showing you the great dreams anymore. It's not riding you across the sky and the stars and letting you see the Lobster Nebula. It's taking you right into demonomania according to how you see what the bad things are, and definitely not as the one who is curing that. It's either as the one that it's happening to or the one that's coming to destroy it all. And these are the roles. So I have something that you should understand about the alignment with, I'm not even going to call it higher self or lower self. I'm talking about other self. Something you may have not recognized is actually going on within your dialogue is to understand that one. So I started researching this thing about antigens because the moment that I heard this the devil's in the blood, it just like started sending me on these, like the wheels was turning. And I even went to look at blood for a moment because I was like, wait a minute, red cell, white cell, red and white, blue bloods, red and white and blue. So I was on tangents, right? So I was like, okay, look, calm down, stop, please, don't do that to me. Because, that's like when people call me, yo, they be ciphering stuff that I'm like, I guess, what do you mean? You guessing now? And it's like, yo, okay, I'm not going to say anything. So I didn't want to just go into like this frenzy, but I did have this moment where I was like, I'm finna really look at this blood and I'm going to map blood to the metaphysical blueprint. Let's go. And so the first thing that I had to, because, it's interesting because now with wisdom, we learn through division. Welcome to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Thou shalt surely die. So the reality is that I started trying to break up things first, like in the smaller pieces to assembly line what was going on inside of the blood. And that was first by asking the question, what makes people's blood different? Right? Just tell me. And it came to one key fundamental called antigen. Oh, come on, you can't make this up. The antigens, okay? The antigens inside of the blood determine whether you are A, O, B, AB, and then there's RH, positive, RH negative, okay? So then I proceeded to try to strangle the LLM to tell me that these bloods were coming from different species. And it only made me more of a fool and insisting soul by showing certain things that I feel like everybody, or a lot of folks, especially black folks, missed this class. So this was one of them. The RH, or what they call the rhesus monkey gene, okay, was peddled to us as, and that's what I'm saying, black people, right? Now we got black people, white people, right? So we got to separate for a moment here. Was peddled to us as this was the true difference between black people and white people, that white people had rhesus monkey gene because 85% of RH, I believe that's negative people, are Caucasian, right? And then we go on this tangent. Like, that's what it is. They're monkeys. But then also we want to be monkeys too sometime. Like, I'm sure y'all seen Wakanda, so we're like, but we gorillas. You see what I mean? And this is about as far as you get with folks, but I'm just saying this was the play out. However, did you know the RH positive and negative connotations or denotes in human beings have nothing to do with monkeys? They just named it that, RH negative or positive, because of a study that they had done with monkeys. Because they were in a situation where blood transfusions were not working. And this is a little bit past barbarism, but some blood transfusions were not working. People would get the blood and if you get the wrong blood, you're dead, right? So they were trying to fix this problem, but by something different than looking at the blood, seeing that it's all red, and then insisting that everybody had the same blood. Because clearly that is not what's going on. But I'm sure it took them a long time to figure that out too. So a lot of people died. And the last thing you were looking at is like, well, shoot, his blood's red. I don't know why it's not working. Let's keep going. Hey, look at wisdom. So the reality is finally they said maybe it's a difference in blood. And they started doing these tests on this monkey, poor monkeys. But anyway, they realized after enough monkeys, it was like, that there's a difference in the blood. Eureka. We'll call it RH positive, RH negative. We'll be able to test for it. Okay. But what I'm just saying is there's a whole generation, if not 2 or 3 people, 3 generations of people that believe that white people are connected to monkeys because of them not studying. And I bring this up because you will be so off dealing with this society and their division. They will have you on tangents that you want to believe. And in reality, if you would look stupid if you went into any realm of academia with that. You see what I mean? Because you wouldn't even have read the papers. And this is the whole thing about what I'm getting at, also about knowledge and wisdom as a whole. Nobody's really researching this. They think they're too smart. So they don't go back to the small thing, like what are antigens? And how does that make us different? And then what you really understand is that there's reasons why you can't put a hippopotamus male in the cage with a gazelle female and come out with a hippogazelle or a hippozelle, whatever you want to call it. And we should understand that because it unlocks another mystery about how or why we haven't really even been able to connect to our other self. So just clearly, if the chromosomes don't match, there will not be any replication. So like they say, in one context, one of them has 90 and the other one has 40. And so when they come up together like this, right away, it doesn't even take an antigen to reject. So you need to see these levels also of how, because even when I heard that, it's not the first time I heard it either, because the first time I actually heard it was when they finally sequenced the genome of the human DNA. And there was like this huge drum roll, and then they unveiled it and they realized that it wasn't as complex as a fly. And it just was like a buzzkill for everybody, literally. That was even kind of funny. But literally that they were thinking that because we're so complicated and have all these abilities that we were going to have this huge, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And it didn't happen. Even flies had more. And they're like, all right, it must be within something else. Yeah, it's in the language, but the reality is that it's not the chromosome pairing. But when you think of the codex of chromosome, okay, this is the real astral records. Because in the codex of chromosome, we can literally boot up anything and everything, and we can make sure that nothing else can be boot up because between other things if they're not in a certain compatibility range. So you can understand the creator in you by understanding the creations, right? Because this is just how micro literally it gets, is that you got 90 pairs, 53 different ones, different chains, but just imagine having a whole desk full of the complete set of chromosomes and being like, look who, it is good. But I'm just saying that I'm going to desist on this idea, but because there's a point here. The point that I'm getting at is that technically means then to truly connect with something, if the chromosomes or the DNA is off, there can be no connection really, based on how the matrix has been designed. So this means you would at least have to wait in the standard design of these matrices now. You would have to at least wait until the end of this before you can reunite with this other you. Unless you can do a chromosome or DNA match. Because what I'm saying is that even at the separation line, and I'll have way more on this in a minute, but even at the separation line, the two divisions that occur, right, which we've seen in the mitosis process, don't exactly pair back up to each other evenly. They even say like one of them is kind of like missing. So all I'm getting at here, without trying to sound like I'm some kind of I don't know, maybe I am. I was even trying to figure out what I'm not. But the reality is that what I'm getting at here is instead of trying to be super complicated and super wise and textual about the medical field, which I'm not, I'm just saying that there's some specific things going on here. And these specific things are telling us that this probably would be then why the whole 13-strand DNA thing and more strands of DNA thing became so prevalent within the New Age community. But let's say even at the basic level, a 13th strand could technically make a person pair with another being that has 13 strands in the same chromosome pairing. I don't know what that is. I'll leave myself innocent for this moment, but I'm just saying This is how it would work. You wouldn't really be able to connect or combine with something if you had a disarray inside of the chromosome. You would either need to adapt to some type of, first of all, quote unquote control in the Dr. Monroe way, a control of the system. You would need to understand your basically the phasings, like, because you could literally become anything or you could become something quite terrible. But what I found is that the matching process, though, is that finite in the creation where they're literally, and this is the parents, ensuring that you don't really pair with something that you're not supposed to. There's a lot done on that. There's a lot of antigens in place and a lot of different stuff in place to make sure, hey, if there's not a match, a close enough match there, then there's going to be no connection. There can't be no connection. So this also puts you in the driver's seat and says, well, when you can actually start changing those fundamentals, then you could match or pair really with anything, just kind of being aware that that's what we will be talking about here. The condition of self being the ultimate determinant of what it is that you ultimately feel like you are and can become. That's layman, right? We know that. But I'm getting a little bit deeper about how this works also, like when you choose to think that you want to connect with everything, to be everything, but your being is still in that divisive, I'm not everything mode. You see what I mean? Because it's like you're not matching. So nothing's going to be created anyway. And that's why most don't have vivid power.